Welcome to Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation. And I'm your host, Dr. Sundiata Keita Cha-Jua. And today we have a really great panel. We're going to talk about political prisoners and prisoners of war. We're going to specifically focus on the Free Mutulu Shakur campaign led by Malcolm X grassroots movement. And we have with us Brother Jonathan Stith, known as Brother Jomo. And we're also going to talk about the FTP movement's effort to start, I guess we would call it a home for veteran warriors and recently released political prisoners and prisoners of war. And we have Kalonji Changa here with us to talk about that. So let me get us started. So I'm going to bring on Brother Kalonji and Brother Jomo to the feed. So Kalonji Changa is considered by many to be one of the most effective organizers in the U.S. An active people's advocate. Kalonji has fought on multiple fronts, tackling issues such as local and national police brutality cases, political prisoner campaigns, and numerous cases involving international human rights violations. Due to his dedication and tenacity, Kalonji has been featured in numerous media outlets, including CNN, Press TV, and the Al Jazeera network, to name a few. Under Kalonji's direction as founder and national coordinator of the FTP movement, programs such as International Feed the People, Black August Organizing Committee, SIAFU Youth Corps, Mama's Army, and the National Coalition to Combat Police Terrorism has matured and developed. Brother Changa is author of the best-selling book, How to Build a People's Army, and co-producer of the award-winning documentary, Organizing is the New Cool. Welcome, Brother Kalonji. We
What's
also
happening?
have with, sorry about that, we also have with us Jonathan Stith, or Jomo, who is an organizer with the Malcolm X grassroots movement, an organization dedicated to the self-respect, self-determination, and self-defense of Black people. He has been a Malcolm X grassroots member for 15 years, serving in the leadership capacity of the DC chapter and on the National Coordinating Committee. And he is a cadre member of the New African Peoples Organization. Jomo is part of the Free Mutulu Now campaign organizing team, Shakur Squad #1, aiming to free Dr. Mutulu Shakur and all political prisoners and prisoners of war. He is a father of 3 children, an avid soccer player, a gardener, and a cabralista. That is to say, he is a scholar of a miracle cabral. All right, welcome, brothers. It's generally a pleasure to have you two here on Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation on the Black Power Media Network. Now, there's two of you guys, so I want you to be concise in your answers because I want to get to a point where a little after 8, we want to open up for questions from the audience. And so I want you to be succinct. Now, I do get actively involved. Sometimes I get worked up and I interrupt for clarification purposes and sometimes to challenge. So understand that that's one of my quirks. Now, I usually begin with biographical questions because I want the audience and often myself to get a sense of who you are and how you became who you are. So the first question to each of you is can you talk about the place you were born, your formative years, the time period in which you were born, and your class background, and how those experiences shaped you to become the political activist that you are today. Um, this is basically working off of a theory from Dr. William Cross Negrescence, or the Negro to Black conversion process. So if you can talk about any seminal incidents that pushed you in the direction to become such prominent political activists as you are today. So I'll start with you, Brother Jomo.
All right. One, excited to be here and to be in this conversation. I grew up, wow, I had to go all the way back, but in the 80s in Cleveland, Ohio. And this son of a lineage of folks, I guess, from my father's side of preachers and teachers. So it's kind of Black professional class. My grandparents, my mom's side, he was a postal worker, and she was a substitute teacher. And I'm listening to an African World Now podcast talk with Tom Porter. He talked about if you had that combination growing up, that was a gold standard. So I grew up kind of with this kind of expectation of like, go to school, you get your education, go to college, you be the first one to go to college, although I wasn't the first one in my family to go to college on my father's side because they had all gotten degrees, but on my mother's side, that was a thing to be achieved. And for me, one of my more formative experiences was in the 80s as kind of crack was moving into communities in Cleveland. My mom made the choice to move us to the suburbs, to Maple Heights. And this was going from a predominantly Black kind of school setting to a predominantly white. And that's where I first started to get a real lesson around race. And kind of and got politicized. And it's interesting. I think for me, part of my own story, I always laughed that I was probably on path to become some kind of Black conservative if I hadn't come across hip hop, particularly KRS-One video, My Philosophy, and saw this Black man standing in the window with a weapon and
with the Malcolm X pose.
Yeah, exactly. Was completely captured. Had to try to figure out who that was. Ended up kind of in my school's library trying to figure out who this person was. Came across the autobiography, read it, and it just made sense of my entire education experience up in that school.
Now, how old are you?
I'm like,
what grade are we talking about?
I'm like
junior high school.
16. Yeah, I'm like sophomore year.
Okay.
And then I'm like the Dead Press song. After that, I'm calling the teacher racist. My mind is exploded. I'm starting to read everything I can get my hands on, challenging history, challenging all the things that I have been taught. Actually really changing the way I started to relate to other Black students, realizing, because I was that smart Black kid, realizing that the kind of isolation and alienation that I was experiencing was a result of the educational system that I was in, and that, the folks, my friends were being tracked to what we now know as the school to prison pipeline. And it's been part of the kind of work I do professionally. And so those were the kind of how I got conscious, if you will, made a decision at that point, wanted to go to Howard University. When you're in there, they tell you to look to the left, look to the right. I was one of those Negroes to the left. I did not make it all the way through. But at the time in DC, this was 1993. And so the brewings of the Million Man March was happening. And that was kind of
right after the rebellion.
Yeah. Yep. And so being on Howard's campus, it was electrified. This was also kind of the last ebb of kind of the Black Nia Force and what's the mayor up in Newark?
Baraka.
Baraka's
right? Father.
No, Roz Baraka.
Roz.
Yeah, that organized.
Yeah, Roz had the Neo Force. Yeah.
So all of that was kind of part of my kind of political orientation. Joined the Nation of Islam at that time in '93, trying to help organize for the Million Man March. Did a lot of work during students. I think that's where I started to realize that I felt called to organizing. After many years in the nation, kind of got dissatisfied with the political direction and the lack of political direction, even after the Million Man March, and ended up realizing that I couldn't do the organizing work that I wanted to do there. Ended up aloof for a while, was really trying to figure out kind of what's my entry back into kind of organizing. Really got challenged by young people I was organizing with who were like, I'm in school all day and I got to organize when I get out of school. You professional all day. What do you do when you get off work? Right. And I was like, oh, that's a fair challenge. I need to really figure out how I do that and match them. So that led me to look out in the world. And I found the Malcolm X grassroots movement. At the time, the chapter lead was Dr. Jared Ball. I knew him from the work that I was doing in DC with young folks. And he invited me to a chapter meeting, and that's how I got involved with the Malcolm X grassroots movement.
You know, what's interesting about your story is that I've had a lot of conversation with people in my generation, and sophomore year seems to be a turning point for a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
All right, so let me bring Kalonji in. So it's essentially the same question. Talk about your formative years, the place, the socio-historical context, and class background, and how you become Kalonji Changa, leader of the FTP movement.
Man, after listening to Jomo's story, man, I feel like, you know, I'm just a plain Jane, you know what I'm saying? Man, my story, right? Let me see here. I'm born in 1970. I'm 51 years old. I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's where I'm from, 45 minutes away from Harlem and all that good stuff over there. Same radio, same TV, same crime. I grew up in a high-rise project. It's called Pequannock Apartments. Right now, due to gentrification, it is a parking lot to a stadium. You know, so you know, I grew up in a not realizing that we were considered poor. You know what I mean? Because of the fact that the only true sense of community that I've lived was growing up in the hood, because of the fact that we were concerned with each other. We looked out for each other, and we grew up, and I still have folks who I came up with from those years till now that I trust more than I do a lot of these folks in the quote unquote movement. I am grateful for that, because of the fact that it gave me the opportunity to know and understand our people on all levels. I am the great grandson of a man by the name of Sam Pace. Sam Pace was a Seminole out of Florida, of course. He was accused of murdering 7 U.S. Marshals when they came on his land and tried to take his brother Aaron. From there, he escaped, moved to South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, well, some part of South Carolina, and then later to Greenville, where my mother was born. My mother meets my father up in Connecticut, you know, Caribbean background, you know, and you know, I was how can I say this? I was learning as I went along, because I was always taught to rebel in the right way. But you know, growing up,
you don't mean good trouble as in John Lewis.
I definitely don't mean good trouble as in John Lewis. You know, I think you could tell, most folks could tell just by my mannerism, that I would never fit into that particular mold. But to be quite honest, I coming up, I never fit into any mold. And I always looked at things like, damn, like, you know, I don't fit over here, I don't fit over there. And you know, it took me years to realize that sometimes you have to create your own lane and cruise control in it. You know what I mean? So moving along, like I said, you know, like Jomo, I was born in the 70s, but I was raised in the 80s. So I was raised during the whole crack era. And with that, you know, not understanding how this how imperialism and capitalism works, I became a I ended up fighting on the wrong side of the barricades. You know what I mean? Meaning that I was out there pushing plantation poison, and then from there I was picking up the arms and I was pointing them in the wrong direction. Now, when I was
what age are we talking about here, Kalonji?
We're talking about teenage years, but you know, growing up in a strict household, my parents didn't know that because of the fact that we come from that old school era where you'll get broke up, you know. But I was moving accordingly. But that's a whole nother interview, or a whole nother story, excuse me. But moving right along, you know, so but with the when I talk about picking up arms, it wasn't necessarily against I considered myself a Robin Hood because I would literally take from the haves and give to the have-nots, and that was a subconscious thing, you know. And it took me to really get locked up at age 17. I ended up in South Carolina, facing prison time, to realize what my parents were talking about all those years, because of the fact that growing up in the quote unquote hood, it's, you know, it's always easier to follow the trends and to want to be like everyone else. So you know, it took me a head bump, and I had that what I call the George Jackson Malcolm University moment. You know what I'm saying? Where you're clear about things because of the fact that you're dealing with these Southern crackers, and they will let you know straight up and down without any type of hesitancy that you know, you are, you know, a nigga, and you know, they are, you know, your master, for lack of better words. But you know, I still, you know, even in that, you know, I was always rebellious. I was always against the grain. So when I finally truly understood what it meant to be at war with your enemy, you know, it was a natural for me. You know what I'm saying? So, you know.
So where it's not simply being locked up gave you the perspective that it's us and them, and that they are oppressors. Is there any study involved? Any mentoring?
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
you're bringing that up.
Yeah, I need to clarify that too. And I need, you know, I was always a reader. If you let my mother tell it, I've been reading since I was 3 years old. You know what I'm saying? The first time I spoke in front of an audience, I was 7. I spoke at a revival in front of 500 people. You know what I mean? So this is who I've always been. But I always read. I was always into Malcolm. I was always and even when I was in the streets, I was still going to protests and rallies and still fighting against police terrorism, so on and so forth. So the contradictions had contradictions. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like I was a lost cause. I always was against the police because of the fact that growing up in the projects is nothing for them to snatch you up, throw you up against the wall, you know, go upside your head, so on and so forth. So we had a natural disdain for the state, even in ignoring what my parents were speaking on. It was ingrained. It was clear, you know, that this was our enemy. So I would say going to prison didn't necessarily educate or enlighten me. Going to prison for the short term was a opportunity for me to reflect and to gain further understanding on what it is I already knew. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
So it wasn't like bing, you know, I woke up and
no,
I want to be a revolutionary.
But you had time to focus.
I had time to focus, and I watched. You know, I also had the opportunity to study others around me. And it was like, you know, you know, they're thinking of master plans on when they got out. And I'm looking, and I'm like, wait, we in South Carolina, and here it is, these funny looking rednecks. They're in control. And I got in trouble a lot with the quote unquote officials because of the fact that one other thing is I was always a comedian. I was always the funny guy in school. You know what I'm saying? You know, we always cracking jokes. I've been in the top 2 on the jokes, you know, forever. You know, so the warden and the guards would be yelling at us and whatnot, and I'll start laughing because I'm like, you know, I whoop your ass if we was anywhere else, but you know, this is so I would get us all in trouble. But it was time, like you said, it gave me the opportunity to reflect, gain understanding, and to advance, and to become a worker, an ant in our people's liberation movement.
All right. So I want to thank both of you for that. And actually, Kalonji, I'd like you to continue and describe the FTP movement. What are its principles and platform? Are there local chapters spread out around the country? And just basically tell our audience what it is and how they could connect to the FTP movement.
No doubt. So in a nutshell, to make it quicker than my last joint, the FTP movement was formed in 2004, going to 18 years ago, June 9th of 2004, right here in Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta in 2004. We are an African revolutionary formation, and we consistently work towards self-determination, sovereignty, cooperative land acquisition, survival preparedness, independent education, self-defense, that type of thing. We're anti-imperialist, anti-fascist, anti-colonialist, and we fight on behalf of African and indigenous and other oppressed people globally. We have programs such as the International Feed the People program, where we served over 300,000 meals, clothes, and delivered water, personal hygiene, and different types of care packages internationally in places like Lukasa, Zambia, Eldoret, Kenya, and Nanop, Australia, and then here in the United States in San Francisco, LA, New Orleans, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Chicago, so on and so forth. We have we fight against police terrorism through one of our programs, the National Coalition to Combat Police Terrorism. That's a program that I started with former political prisoner Dhoruba bin Wahad and former U.S. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. They co-chaired, and I was served as the coordinator, for lack of better words. So FTP, really, in a nutshell, we have all types of different programs, educational, so on and so forth. We have the Siafu Youth Corps, which is an African Boys and Girl Scout program, where we teach them everything from African martial arts to archery, agriculture, and just independence, right? We use what we call creative resistance. You know what I'm saying? So
you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, we recognize that a lot of times our people want to remix the 60s. You know what I'm saying? Everybody want to be a Panther. You know what I'm saying? Everybody want to walk around with the uniforms, look tough, so on and so forth. Either that, or they want to become cultural nationalists, and they want to have the big beads and the big gallons of water and the staffs and the flip-flops and vegan lollipops. That's cool. Well, you're not knocking that. You know what I'm saying? But in order for us to reach the masses, we have to be able to contend and compete with what's out there. So we do everything from put together CDs, music projects, hip hop videos, art shows. We have some of the dopest artists that exist. We do. What else? What am I thinking about? We have a film, Organizing is the New Cool. So with creative resistance, we're like cherry cough drops. We make it taste so good that you forget it's medicine. You know what I'm saying? So we draw that line, whereas we make people feel comfortable about getting involved, and then we come with the terms. You know what I'm saying? Our political education is through as Yui said, the people learn through observation and participation. So we got to make it look fly, the clothes, everything. We're not trying to separate ourselves from the people, because we are the people. And I think that sometimes we get confused into thinking that we're the vanguard and we got to lead the people. No, that's not really how it goes. You know what I'm saying? The masses are more in tune and more intact and more in touch with what's going on in their lives than we are. You can't have a town hall meeting over on the other side of town and the people from the town aren't invited. You understand what I'm saying? So we try to make it plain, as Malcolm says, you know?
Okay, thank you for that. Jomo, essentially the same question. Describe Malcolm X grassroots movement. What are its principles and platform? Where are the chapters located, and how someone listening could connect?
Absolutely. The Malcolm X Grassroots Movement is an organization of Africans in America, or New African, and our mission is to defend the human rights of our people and promote self-determination for our colonized nation and oppressed communities throughout the U.S. empire. We understand kind of the collective institutions of patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism continue to be at the root of our folks' oppression. And that we understand that without community control, without the power to determine our lives, we'll continue to fall victim to genocide. And so part of the organization's work is to heighten our consciousness, our people's consciousness about self-determination and national independence as a human right and as a solution to our continued colonization. And part of what we've been doing is trying to build a network of Black and New African freedom fighters who are committed to this kind of protracted struggle for the liberation of the New African nation. And we operate on kind of 6 principles of unity. They're lengthy. You can check them out on freedomlandmxgm.org. But the first principle is, one, we struggle to defend the human rights of all of our folks, and that we actively oppose social, economic, political, and cultural practices that contribute to the violation of our people's human rights. We call and demand reparations or repayment for the hundreds of years of slavery, the continued colonialization and oppression of our people. We promote self-determination. We oppose genocide and acceptable, calculated killing of our people. We call for the freedom of all political prisoners and prisoners of war. And then our 6th principle is that we struggle to actively end sexist oppression. Currently, we have 8 chapters throughout the empire, in Atlanta, Jackson, Mississippi, Champaign, Illinois, DC, where I'm at, Philadelphia, New York, Detroit, and Oakland, California.
Okay, thank you, Brother Jomo. Now, I need to ask you guys to just kind of humor me, right? I know that our core audience knows that we have dozens, right, maybe scores of political prisoners and prisoners of war. And I know that they understand the concepts, but, you know, sometimes you get new people, novices. And so if you can just walk us through, and either of you can start, what if you had to sit down with a 15-year-old and explain to them the concept of a political prisoner and a prisoner of war, what would you say to them?
Go ahead and take the lead, Jomo. You're in DC. I'm gonna throw you the ball real quick. Now,
that was a superb act of leadership.
Hey, man,
how to delegate.
Right.
Hey, man, why you call me out, Sundiata?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, the way I would explain it to a 15-year-old would be like, you know, have you ever gotten in trouble for something that you felt was the right thing to do, but others around you felt like it was the wrong thing to do? And that's usually kind of at root of what a political prisoner is. You know, and so there's kind of a couple ways of well, one is kind of there's a broad there's not a full consensus around what makes a political prisoner. There are some kind of broad ways that folks have it. I think I would ground my definition in the definition that comes out of the Jericho movement, and they understand political prisoners as folks who've been jailed related to their political work. In that, they also include those like the Field Marshal General George Jackson, who was politicized in prison, and because of that was persecuted by the state while continuing to be incarcerated. There are also prisoners of war, which we understand are combatants who engaged in armed struggle in support of national liberation. And then the kind of third category, or for kind of third categories, are exiles, right? Those who are continue to live outside of the empire because of their political activity, most notably Assata Shakur, but also that includes Nahanda Abadoon, who recently transitioned in, I think, 2018, 2019, as examples of that. So it's anytime folks are being jailed because of their political beliefs or their political activity, that makes one a political prisoner. Russell Maroon Schultz, he offers, again, in his book, kind of, he broadens the
Give us the title of the book, brother.
The title of the book is Maroon the Implicable. Excuse my copy. It's a worn copy. It's a little old. It's been in the
field. Supposed to be worn, man.
Hey, brother, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But he lays out a kind of a criteria that seeks to expand what we understand a political prisoner is. And if you want to even broaden it out, Malcolm says that America means prison. So all of us, a part of captured nations, in some ways, could consider ourselves political prisoners.
No doubt.
Hold the book up again, because we do want folks to get the title.
All right. Wait, am I getting?
Yeah, you got. There you go.
All
right. So, Kalonji, you share the same interpretation, but even if you do, put a personal spin on it.
No doubt. I would say, to add on to what Comrade was saying, I would start by saying that that I received my political education from members of the Black Guerrilla Family, the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panther Party, Republic of New Africa, so on and so forth. So, as the comrade stated, you're going to get various definitions as to what a political prisoner is. I would say a political prisoner is someone who was targeted in prison because of their political actions, affiliations, and beliefs, of course, but also a political prisoner is a person who, while in prison, takes up and maintains political struggle. Political prisoners are often segregated from the regular prison population to keep them from influencing and transforming others into recruits for the movement. So, in a nutshell, like I would often say that we're all political prisoners. We're all prisoners of war because we were captured by enemy combatants, right? That's number one. Oftentimes, you have different organizations that classify political prisoners based on their particular comrades, just keeping it real, folks who they know. But in working with, and I like to say shout out to OG Shaka Thenin, one of my teachers who just transitioned last week. He was the chairman of the Black August Organizing Committee. But from folks like him and OG Kamasi, I learned of political prisoners who exist, who are not mainstream, who you're not going to find on the website. Because unfortunately, we take a certain degree of arrogance when it comes to movement, our liberation movement. If you haven't, quote unquote, heard of the organization, then it's like they don't exist. As my brother Balagoon say, if you don't know a thing, it doesn't exist. So there's a whole lot of formations. There's a whole lot of freedom fighters out there who put in serious work. Unfortunately, because of the fact that, some people move with the whole question of guilt or innocence. When you are a political prisoner, it's not a question of guilt or innocence. It's not whether you set it off to liberate your comrades. It's the fact that you set it off to liberate your comrades, or that you thought about doing it, or you might have been at a program that was talking about doing it, or you was at a program that highlighted the contradictions of the state. You know what I'm saying? That drew that line. You might have been feeding the homeless. You might have been working to educate the masses. You might have been talking about the environment, speaking out against the environmental justice, so on and so forth. So the thing is, depending on who you speak to, you might get a different brand. But I think that from what Comrade Jomo just said, we generally agree on what a political prisoner is. If I was talking to a 15-year-old, I would start off by saying that, look, you heard of slavery, right? We were enslaved. We were taken off of our land because we practiced African scientific socialism. We were stolen because folks wanted to utilize free labor. You know what I'm saying? So they captured us. They kidnapped us, right? we were our resources were robbed and stolen. So some of us resisted and we wanted to fight back. You know what I mean? So to this very day, the very thought of resistance is a criminal act. The very thought of responding to state violence or matching state violence is considered terrorism because of the fact that you don't have the right. You don't have the right to rebel under a fascist regime. So and most of the 15-year-olds I deal with Seattle Youth Corps, it would be clear to them. I work with a lot of youth whose parents are quote unquote behind enemy lines right now, who are incarcerated right now. So they're clear because oftentimes they saw how the state got down with their parents. They see how, they deal with them. So the one beautiful thing about the state is they will force you into position whether you want to or not.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? However you want to do it, they say that people get involved either through inspiration, aspiration, or desperation. Unfortunately, most of us are desperate. I would break it down like that if I was as fly as you two brothers.
Well, I want to push you guys. When I was a sophomore, we did a citywide boycott of the schools, Decatur, Illinois. And the organization that worked with us, the adult organization that worked with us was called LABA, Local Association for Black Action. There was some people who were around LABA, and they used one of our marches during the school boycott because the police followed us, the length of the city for the march, to rob a bank. And it wasn't to fund the movement. It was for personal gain. They were captured. They claimed they were political prisoners. How do you guys respond to that kind of scenario? Because, there's a widening. And if you, like a balloon, if you put too much air in it, it bursts. And I'm wondering if we expand the concept of political prisoner to the point where it has no specific content.
I would pose the question, when you say for personal gain, was it for Cadillacs and diamond rings, or was it to eat? Was it for food, clothing, shelter?
Cadillacs and diamond rings, brother.
That's what.
But I get your point.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that matters.
Yeah. What for survival?
Right. Right. You said it wasn't or was?
It was not.
Okay.
These
it wasn't for
survival. Were surviving okay.
Would I consider them political prisoners? No, I wouldn't necessarily consider them politically prisoners. I would consider them misguided. I would consider them victims of capitalism. I would consider them victims of the false dichotomy, the false luxuries of success, and I think they would be misguided and misdirected. However, we don't throw them away because, again, like you said, we talk about Malcolm, we talk about Field Marshal George Jackson. These are folks who, George was accused of robbing a gas station for $70. You know what I'm saying? Right. Malcolm X, El Haj Malik Shabazz, he was, for all practical purposes, he was assassinated at age 39. He was more Detroit Red than he was Malcolm the majority of his life. You understand what I'm saying? So we don't throw the baby away with the bathwater.
So one of the things I would say that one of the brothers, while in prison, became politicized, and they kept him in prison because he had become a political organizer in the joint. Right. And I would say that at that point, he transitions to a political prisoner. Right. Would you guys agree?
Yes. And I would just add, because I did see one of the things that I was going to say, and shout out to Coco in the chat, that they would be social prisoners before becoming political prisoners. So
so explain that concept, social prisoner.
They are victims of they're misguided, they're misdirected. They're moving on the on the strength of what capitalism shows them, the trinkets,
the fantasies that it induces.
It's that false sense of power, and the unfortunate thing is most of us we reach for perceived power, the perception of power. That's the Jay-Z's, that's the Will Smiths and all these other cats.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'll look at them and say, oh, they're a billionaire, they got power. No, they don't have power.
Right.
They have the trinkets that come with power. If Elon Musk had the money that Jay-Z had, he'd jump out the window.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? He'd kill himself because of the fact that Jay-Z's broke compared to him. You know what I'm saying? So these are social prisoners who are guided by or lured by the trinkets of capitalism.
Yeah.
Jomo, you want to add to that, or you just gonna ride with it?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the assessment. I think that, you know, again, we always got to throw it back, or, you know, like I think Kwame Ture like says, you know, if we don't talk about oppression in the equation, in the situation, then we end up missing the mark. And so that's important to understand kind of what's the matrix that's generating that kind of activity, that level of thinking, and those actions. And to the point that was said, right, like the prisons then become a space, a radicalizing space. So if you wasn't radicalized then, he got radicalized in that moment, and that's important to be able to, again, not throw our people away, to understand that the crimes that they're committing are crimes of survival, crimes of capitalism, and capitalism itself is the ultimate crime.
That's
right.
Right.
And whereas to add on to what Jomo was saying, and I like what you said, to add on to what he's saying as well, we're talking about we're judging and basing the rules of engagement on our enemy, on what they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The quote unquote crimes we commit for the most part are for what? Survival. But what they did, which they broke anything you can think of, they've already committed it. Any felony, any misdemeanor, while they was writing it on the books, they was doing it.
Crimes against humanity
as a whole. Genocide, the whole nine. So I mean, you know, we already know their play. So we have to be careful, like you said, and not just look at it through European lenses and just say, well, you know, he deserves to go to prison for 36 years because he sold crack to some people in the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Right, but once you know better, then you do better. You know, and you know, so
you have projects, Free Mutulu campaign, building a dwelling, a home for political prisoners and prisoners of war. And so I guess the first question I want to say is, why those projects, and why should your typical brother, whether they're a sister that's just trying to feed the kids, make it day to day, why should they be concerned and interested in liberating our political prisoners and prisoners of war? And here I'm working on the more narrow definition, but why these projects? Why is it important? Why is it essential that we take up those projects? Either of you can add a first stab at that.
Get that ball to Jomo again, man, because he keeps knocking out the ballpark.
All right, there's something happening here, Jomo.
I know.
You're going to have to be quicker.
I'm respecting my elders. That's what it is.
You older than me. You said 70. You right. You at 51. I ain't there yet.
Why you bringing up old stuff,
Kalonji,
man?
You don't get to do that but once, brother.
Oh,
it's
okay.
On you.
Sundiata gonna pull rank on me. Okay, I got you. Yeah. So
I saw brother being abused. That's what I do.
How the brother being abused? I'm over here trying to show him respect. I'm like, you know, let this brother go first. Anyway, boy, y'all colder than the white man on this show. Liberation housing, man. Man, for us, we look at it like, you have, and for the record, for folks who are not familiar with Liberation Housing, is one of the projects that we're working on right now. It's a transitional wellness type situation for veteran freedom fighters. We feel like oftentimes, our brothers and sisters, our comrades, they get out of prison, and they're paraded around like they're pets or something. You know what I'm saying? And they're at all the different events, and you're taking pictures with them, and we shouting them out, and everybody's posting up about them, and I met such and such, so on and so forth, right? But after that gets old, a couple months later, and you're used to them, no one's checking to make sure that the comrades have a place to reside. You know what I'm saying? No one's checking to make sure that they're eating. It's not like they have a 501k. You know what I'm saying? I just got out of prison doing 40 years and whatnot, so they're gonna bless me with this stipend. It don't go like that. The enemy, the state, recognizes and realizes that they are they are who they are, for lack of better words. And threat. Yeah, so they're left out there for the wolves. So our position is we wanted to begin to build situations whereas, even if they're not a newly released political prisoner, right. I say a veteran, because you don't even have to be a political prisoner. You could be a veteran freedom fighter. Mm-hmm. I don't know a nation, a civilized nation, that would throw their veterans on the street outside of the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah, the U.S. would definitely throw their
look all up and down the street.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I'm saying? That's so the thing is you are a temp worker to them, but to us, you are our loved one. You know what I'm saying? To us, you are the folks who help to pave the way for us to be able to ride that path. You know what I mean? So Liberation Housing, we feel, is a necessity. We feel that a couple different things, like we have a urban survival preparedness program. We don't believe as an organization that you can be a serious formation and not have something dealing with our survival and preparedness. Mm-hmm. We have to have an apparatus if we're serious. Mm-hmm. We can't, you can't have Katrina and folks are looking at you, they like, man, Baba Sundiata, what we gonna do? And you laid up in the same gym next to them. All that African shit and left is this and that. It don't mean nothing now. You know what I'm saying? What are the alternatives? So with Liberation Housing, it is one of the things that you would call a survival program, pending revolution. You know what I'm saying? So we look to build homes where it may be multiple brothers in a house, right. 6 brothers in the home or whatever, gardens, place for political education, so on and so forth. Not something we're putting on the internet to show everybody, look what we did. We're not putting them on Front Street or using them again. You know what I'm saying? But something to build them and help them to get to the next stage in life. Okay, boom, you got 18 months. We're going to work with you. We're going to have our own social workers and comrades to make sure that we get you in a situation that'll be affordable for you. You know what I'm saying? That we can assist in the funding. So that's what Liberation Housing is. And I hope I didn't go all the way around the world.
No, brother. I think that is so essential, because we're talking about people who, in many cases, put their lives on the line for our people. And we need to be able to take care of them in their old age. We need to be able to take care of them when they weren't able to, quote unquote, take the petty bourgeois route and end up at a university or what have you. That's right. So no, absolutely. Can you put some information in the chat? How can people contribute to Liberation Housing? Folks who watch this program, what can they do?
The first thing you could do is, I hate to sound like Umar Johnson, donations. Nah, the first thing you could do is, contribute what you can. You know what I'm saying? Support in whatever way you may have.
So where would I send that support? Okay, you got it in there.
Yep, right. Just throw it in the chat.
Good.
But I would say that and I'm over here operating your joint like it's my show right now.
Boy.
I'm sorry. I work here.
Jomo under the bus. Now you coming at me. All right, Siafu. Seafood. Go on.
We together on this track. Nah, but yeah, so I mean, if you're in the Atlanta area, skill sets work. You know what I'm saying? It's all hands on deck. You may have a plot of land that you're not using. You may have some folks to build, whatever, or a financial contribution is good as well. You know what I'm saying? And we're working with some of our comrades in Richmond, Virginia. They have a nonprofit. It's called the Natural Festival. So, you can write it off, 501s, 3C, whatever the case is, and keep it moving. So but it's something that you can see the growth. It's not just like you're gonna just throw some money in the pot and we're gonna tell you like, yeah, we $400,000 short. Like, damn, I thought you said you only needed 100,000. Yeah, man, but things be happening.
brother, the folks in the chat are holding you up. They immediately put in Kalonji is far from an Umar Johnson.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, Jomo. So the Free Mutulu Shakur campaign, and I know we're talking about free all political prisoners, but we focused in this instance specifically on Mutulu and why.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One, or I guess we should talk about who Dr. Mutulu Shakur is. One, he is a political prisoner of war. Again, going back to our definition, he was what we considered a soldier, part of the Black Liberation Army. He's a healer, doctor of acupuncture, and has been in jail now for 36 years. He was sentenced to 30 years, so he's 6 years beyond his sentence. He's part of a set of prisoners that include other political prisoners like John from the not Mumia.
There's like 7 or 8 BLA.
Yeah, Leonard Peltier that's who I was thinking about. Leonard Peltier is amongst those kind of folks who are held in federal prison under this federal old law, along with 200 of our folks as well. And so part of the campaign has been demanding not only his freedom, but the freedom of those political prisoners and those continue to held under this federal old law provision that continues to hold our folks. But for us in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, Mutulu is a father, he's a grandfather, and he's again a founder of both our organizations, NAPO and the Malcolm X grassroots movement. If we understand again the history of why we have political prisoners.
Let me cut in here though. Now you said Mutulu's a healer.
Yeah.
Explain that and the significance of the intervention he developed in terms of dealing with the poisoning of our people.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is about like 60s, 70s, right? The United States government is using methadone to treat veterans coming back. And other folks kind of around addiction. And this is creating greater addiction. And in some of his writing, they talk about how the kind of methadone in the community actually started to impact movement organizations. Folks were getting turned out. And so the intervention that he and others using acupuncture to actually address addiction in our communities, to actually and then also political education. That was a huge part of the work, was helping folks understand the root of their addiction, understanding that it was being generated by this capitalist, racist, sexist society, and that there was a way, another way of healing ourselves and healing our bodies, and that was the use of acupuncture, right? Again, that he learns from trying to find a solution for some health problems with his own children, right? He comes across acupuncture that's being also used in China as a connection with Mao and the revolutionary work there, and the concept of doctors without the barefoot doctors, right? So he takes that concept and begins to apply it in New York, in the Bronx, to address the conditions there, gets down with the Young Lords as part of the takeover of Lincoln hospital, which at the time was with a death hospital. They tell the stories like you go into Lincoln, you don't come out. And so this was all part of work of really challenging the U.S. healthcare system, the profit system, right? There were pharmaceutical companies making millions off the methadone treatment. And so Dr. Mutulu Shakur and again these other revolutionary healers and doctors are intervening in that process, actually challenging the U.S. Policy around kind of drugs, and so that instantly makes him a target. In addition to that, he is leading one of the leading investigators in COINTELPRO, and so again, when we understand the source of most political prisoners in this country, it comes out of COINTEL prosecution, and Mutulu was the one leading the investigation into and lawsuits against COINTELPRO, actually exposing it. So there's so many ways for us. We understand that his imprisonment is tied to COINTELPRO, that being able to take him off the scene again left our communities vulnerable to the drug surge that again shaped my own story, right? We understand in Kalonji's story too, right? This massive influx of drugs from the federal government in our communities. Mutulu and his program is wiped out, right? And it just leads to a flooding of our communities. The inability to really challenge COINTELPRO creates the conditions now where you got Al Sharpton, the snitch, the leader of Black America, right? So so we have to understand kind of, and I think that's some of the challenge, at times talking about political prisoners and really connecting it to folks is that the question isn't why is it important? The question is why isn't it important, right? And I was as I was preparing for this, I got pulled into a piece that Safari Bakari wrote. Is another political prisoner, part of the BLA, did a lot of work when she was she was a soldier too, like escaped a couple of times, and was a fight to free others. And she had this quote. So she's like, the term political prisoner means nothing to the average brother and sister on the block because the terms liberation and revolution mean nothing. These words have no meaning to our people, no meaning because we have done no real organizing and education for liberation. And then she goes around talking about how folks require kind of concrete examples, and that when we have those concrete examples, they will be confronted by the state. And as we heard from Kalonji's story, and also the state becomes the great participation in trying to get free is the greatest educator that you can have around the relevancy of why political prisoners are important, why the fight to freedom are important. So I think that's the call for us, is like we have to make the fight for political prisoners relevant through our continued organizing and concrete work, and the amazing work that they're doing to support political prisoners, to feeding folks, to building the gardens are all a part of that. That brings you, confront to the state. I'm not sure if they had those same laws, but I know at one point they're making it illegal to feed people, homeless people in some parts of the country, making it illegal to grow food to feed people in different parts of the country. So, as long as we're not struggling for liberation and revolution, then revolutionaries feel unimportant. But it's only when we're doing that then we begin to understand their struggle, because their struggle becomes our struggle, because we begin to live it, because the persecution becomes real to us, because the system hasn't changed in the years that we've been fighting it.
So how can someone who listens to this broadcast connect to the Free Mutulu Shakur campaign?
Right.
And how can they contribute?
Right. Right. Like donate. Right now we're in a the update on the case is that Mutulu just had a new parole hearing this past week. So right now we are on standby waiting to hear back what the ruling was. The parole hearing comes as a result of a legal victory that they had in California that struck down one of the kind of violation tickets that he had that was being used to continue to deny his parole, and that generated this new parole hearing. And so we're in the process of now waiting. Hopefully, we will be moving to a new phase of our struggle, which is the Mutulu is welcome here, right? And so again, the work that we understand Kalonji and others are doing is part of the work that we have to be about, right? Being able to create the set of conditions to bring him and all the political prisoners home to their families and continue to build communities of care around them while they're with us.
Okay, and I can connect to the Malcolm X Grassroots website to get further information. And in the case of Mutulu, there's a film that documents his work, right? Dope is Death.
Yeah, you gotta check out Dope as Death.
And you can get it on YouTube for free, right?
You can get it on YouTube for free. Yup.
Okay.
So after you finish this show, go look up Dope as Death. Watch it. It's a 90-minute film. And again, gives a way better context than I did. It really gives you a sense of his impact. And that's been one of the beautiful things about the campaign. Anybody who's known Mutulu when he was doing his work in New York, anytime we've asked for a letter of support or to show up, it's been easy, right? Easy, but folks are willing to drop what he's doing. It speaks to the kind of character of that he is as a revolutionary, the kind of impact he's had, impacting kind of thousands of people through the work at Lincoln Detox, thousands of people through the work around acupuncture and the work that he's done kind of all over the world, helping support liberation struggles in Zimbabwe. That's interesting. That's part of what they say he used the money for. When you talk about bank robbery, he used expropriation money to supposedly pay for a camp for Black kids in Mississippi, that he used the money to fund liberation struggles in Zimbabwe. And so I ain't mad at that. I ain't mad at that.
Hey.
I'm with you on that.
That's righteous. That's completely righteous.
That's why I wanted you to speak first, because see, I knew you was gonna have it right. Let's see. My brother.
my brother, I appreciate you. So I want to ask a question that's been on my mind, because we've been fighting, like all of our community, we've been fighting this gun violence piece. Now, personally, it's interesting to me that the police are not trying to interdict the guns being brought into the community. And so they only going after the young brothers. But the point is that all across the empire, gun violence has become a disruptive and indeed murderous force in our community. And so I've been asking folks, what's the revolutionary solution to gun violence? Now, I don't want to brand all of these youth as lumping, but what I've seen here in CU, that we are talking about people, the shooters often have a long record of preying on our people. And so the question is that the Panthers had varying degrees of success in transforming the lumping. In the contemporary context, right, in which we're not at a high tide of struggle, how do we reach out to our people who are, as Brother Kalonji said, misguided, and they are playing out their fantasies? They seek to, they're what Huey P. Newton called illegal capitalists, and they're preying on our people. How do we bring that contradiction? How do we resolve it and convert as many as we can to turning their guns on the enemy? And Jomo, if I was you, I'd be quick to say Kalonji. But
I mean, I'm ready to jump in. I don't think there's no easy answer to that except struggle. I think Kwame Ture gives us the answer is organize, organize, organize. I think it is, again, understanding how the systems of capitalism, this kind of hyper masculinity, are all forces shaping what's happening in our communities. This kind of fights over turf and resources and status are all kind of reflections, like we said, of the capitalist system. And part of our work is transformation of our folks in our communities. And that means also being able to transform the material conditions that are generating this. I think that is the challenge. And that is very hard and difficult work. But that's the work that needs to be done. We do need to figure out how we wage a struggle on two fronts. For us in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, a lot of that extends from our work around Let Your Motto Be Resistance, the handbook for New African Organizing for Community Self-Defense. And we talk about that in that. How do we deal with the kind of internal threats, the internal intercommunal violence that exists, and for us, that is building out kind of self-defense networks that again are stripped of kind of like how we understand kind of self-defense to be, but really be centered in community, really centered in how we care for one another in some really different ways. And so, but again, that there's no easy answers. There is no magical bullets around that except to get out there and to organize.
Brother Kalonji.
Yeah, I would say the first thing we have to do is we got to and definitely, you know, salute to all of what Jomo said. That, and I'm just gonna add on with it, if I may. I would first say the first thing we have to do is we have to be realistic. We live in a very violent culture. We live under a very violent system. Everything from music to television to video games to movies, to the U.S. government bombing every fucking body that they could on the planet. You know what I'm saying? Nuclear weapons, armaments, takeovers, so on and so forth. Okay, so like Minister Yui again, I think I might have said this earlier. He said that people learn through observation and participation, right? And the masses, and as you stated, you know, some who you would call the lumpen, quote unquote, you know, they're learning through observation, so they want to participate. So what do? Siafu movement, FTP movement. We have different programs. When we're talking about the Siafu Youth Corps, we're talking about teaching folks how to respect the weapon. So you'll be trained on how to break down these weapons now, because you have quote unquote Second Amendment rights. So we're teaching you how to break these guns down, teaching you how to what type of knives to use, how to use them, so on and so forth. But the importance of the safety of it. You know what I'm saying? If it's archery, so on and so forth. We teaching folks. We have a brother who teaches. He's a former combat medic. You know what I mean? So he's teaching them how to sew wounds and dealing with bullet holes, all that type of stuff. So the first thing with that political education is a respect for what it is you're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? It's easy. I mean, you're not going to. I mean, think about it. You can tell a kid, you know, we don't pick up the gun, so on and so forth. And you know, as we know, it's not the gun itself, it's the mind behind the gun. We know that, right? We learned that. But wouldn't it be better if you take them and to the range? You understand what I'm saying? And at the range, they're not shooting at black targets. You understand what I'm saying? They're shooting at targets that they're familiar with who don't look like them. Okay, but it's political education along with it. Okay, this is why you can't do such and such. You take them out of the hood. Man, look, we going on a camping trip. You know what I'm saying? Y'all down, let's get a van, go get a bus, whatever. Here go the rules of engagement. This is what we dealing with. We ain't no church. You know what I'm saying? We're not the NAACP. We ain't none of these other people. Our motto is we love you, but we will fuck you up if you get out of order. We want you to know that we can get down the way you get down, or we can all get up. You understand what I'm saying? So the beautiful thing about our organization, and it's not a tooting your horn because of the fact that we're all a part of one organization. It's just that we have these different tribes and different, you know, everybody want to be the flyest slave with the biggest chains and the biggest whips. You know what I'm saying? In my organization and this and shit, when we all jacked up. Okay. But take them out of the environment. It's hard to get the attention of a people if you're in the middle of a situation. If you're in a brothel, you know what I'm saying? It's hard if you say, look, sis, you know, if I was you, I wouldn't do that, whatever. You know what I'm saying? You know, you have to, you can't get a person's attention until you take them out the environment.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The dude with the dope needle hanging out his arm, he ain't trying to hear what you talking about. He trying to get high right now. You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, we have to be able to be creative with how we reach and how we respond. Because the quote Kwame Ture, like brother just did a few minutes ago, you know what I'm saying? He said, there are people, so we got to give them a chance. He said, they mess up, we give them another chance. He said, you mess up, you give them another chance. He said, you mess up again, then you got to off them. The fact is, everybody's not going to make it. Now, we're not, let's not get it twisted and act like, like we're going to transform everybody, because I know some people that argue and be like, well, such and such, he was a common crook, he was a thief, or whatever, he was a gang leader, so on and so forth. Now we have to go beyond that context, not just they're in a gang. What makes them join an unpoliticized street organization?
Right.
What made it? What transformed that organization until what is considered a gang?
Many of us came out of those kinds of street organizations.
Of course. But beyond that, I mean, and you have folks like, and not to call it, but like folks like Deruba, he comes out of that particular situation. So many other brothers, the OG Shakers, so on and so forth. These are brothers and the Kamasis and all of them. They come out of these particular conditions, and these are the people that I resonate with because of the fact that I'm an on the ground type person. See, it's easy for us to talk this shit behind the microphone. It's easy for us to be in a lecture hall. It's easy for us to get these speaking engagements and go on tour and never touch the hood. Never touch the hood.
That's right.
Yeah. We talking about
maybe go down and get some barbecue one night.
Right.
Yeah,
we got the Black Panther party. We got the Black Panelist party.
You know what I'm saying? With a whole bunch of of security and all kinds of other shit, or send somebody to get it. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is, you have to meet the people where they at. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not able to do that, then you may want to reconsider your occupation or support those who do. The problem is that I run into oftentimes, by me being down with the grit, by me being a rubber to the road type person, I bump heads with the quote unquote intellectuals because they want to tell us about ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And I get quite confused. I'm like, shit, you know more about me than I do. You understand what I'm saying? Because, I read over here such and such, such and such, according to Marx or Lenin or whoever, you know what I'm saying? It ain't the diss Marx or Lenin. I'm just saying we have to look at the conditions and the climate, and everything has to be, you know what I'm saying? Everything has to be measured, and we have to have an understanding as to where we at. I might have a Feed the People program, but that might not work in Champaign, Illinois, because everybody might be eating good out there. Yeah, man, what you talking about? Feed the Homeless program?
No, brother. I don't think our people are eating good.
No. And I'm just a wild example, but we have to know exactly where we at. You're not going in Beverly Hills starting to Feed the People program. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. Though that time may come, because this shit is falling.
I'm looking forward to it coming. You know what I'm saying? We got to eat the rich. Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to go to the chat and see what questions we have for the two of you. So let me start scrolling through. There's more statements than questions. But there is this question from Anarchist, and it's aimed. It's for you, Kalonji, but you could jump in, Jomo, or you could be designated. Is FTP have a capacity to grow to the pre-revolution Irish volunteers?
Yeah, you got that.
Shout out to the IRA. How about that? You know what I'm saying? Does it have the capacity? I'm kind of confused with what I'm gonna try to work with what you're saying. Let me see if I can read it. What do I think about volunteers who practiced in ranks and led off the Irish Revolution? Yeah, I mean, listen, man. We make an effort to be very clear so there's no misunderstandings, right? Here's my position. You can help, but you don't run shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm about an African-led struggle, period. We're down for you to get involved because of the fact that, capitalism is a parasite and a poison to the planet. You understand what I'm saying? So we're not against anyone assisting or helping or aiding in our people's liberation.
I don't think that's the thrust of the question, though. But what he's really asking you is, and you know, it's the kind of question that if you know what you're asking, you wouldn't ask.
Right.
At least not publicly. But he's asking you, can you do the Easter? Can FTP pull off the Easter Rebellion that the Irish did in 1921? That's what he's asking.
Yeah. What in that case, I say next question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. I would never. You know, I don't.
That's just a crazy question. You know what? I shouldn't even have asked it.
Yeah, I feel like Sundiata trying to set me up. Him and Jomo. Sorry, Jomo. Jomo, like, man, that was
build revolutionary unity.
Yeah. I say help make some sandwiches. That's what we do.
All right.
Yeah.
Boy, there's okay. This is intriguing. That there really are just a lot of.
I see a question right here. You might be looking over some of the questions. You might have to refresh yours. I see like 3 questions, Sundiata.
Okay, well, you see them ask them.
Run the studio for him.
It's my night off.
Hey, no shame in my game.
Someone asked the question. Go ahead, you got it?
Yeah. What are some good topics to include in letters to political prisoners? You're talking about someone writing someone code. Well, what would be a good way to generate a conversation with a political prisoner?
Yeah. I think I feel like one of the ABC, the anarchists, they have a kind of a tip sheet that folks can look at in terms of what you want to write. But I think the usual way is to kind of introduce yourself to the person, maybe even sharing how you learned about them. Usually, oftentimes, I encourage, like when we're in the campaign, to when you're writing Mutulu, to tell them where you heard about the program or where you heard about him in the campaign. To talk about a little bit about yourself or a little bit about kind of what brought you to this thing. And I always think it's really important to let the political prisoners know that they're not forgotten. And that there is a movement to free them, right? And I think from there you can leave it open. I've seen other places, other supports where being able to write and talk about things are happening in the world, describing things because of the kind of the dark, dank places that these American dungeons are. That these kind of offers of aliveness and kind of life are useful. But I think it is just start with sharing a little bit about yourself, how you heard about them, and expressing gratitude and thanks for their sacrifice and their struggle.
Right.
We got a couple of questions. One question is about organizing eviction prevention. And the question is that part of a collective survival action that has the potential to be a survival program for communities?
Yeah, I think there are organizations whose primary focus is around housing. You know what I'm saying? I'll start with that. There's no one organization that can do everything. I want to point out that when I talk about FTP movement, I'm talking about the SIAFU movement, which is a larger collective. It is that plus. So we have the African Martial Arts Institute. We have the Urban Survival Preparedness Institute. We have Mama's Army. We have National Coalition to Combat Police Terrorism, and SIAFU Youth Corps, and a couple other organizations, 52 Blocks ATL. So there's no do-it-all organization. And one of the things that one of the frustrations that I get is there's always people that come along telling us what we should be doing. And the we shit, I had to tell them to get their pronouns right, because if we talking about we, that means your ass should get involved in this as well. Because I think that they separate. It's like some type of separation thing. Like, the fuck you mean what we should be doing?
Right.
You're not oppressed? You know what I'm saying? I used to live in
long range of bullshit.
Man, you know what I'm saying? I used to live in the west end of Atlanta. I'm not gonna tell folks where I live right now, But part of the reason I had to move was because of the fact that you had cats that was like damn near twice my size knocking on my door, banging on my door, talking about the police is beating somebody up on the corner. Why the hell are you over here knocking on my door? You know what I'm saying? What are you doing besides coming to get me? You know what I mean? And I don't mind. I work in the hood. I'm cool with, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I'm not interested. We're not superheroes. You know what I'm saying? We're not special. The greatest compliment that you could pay us is by supporting us and getting involved. Right. That is the greatest compliment. You know what I'm saying? There are a number of different brothers and sisters who I met in the damnedest places. There are sisters, we would go to certain places that some of you would think that, oh, I wouldn't go there. You know what I'm saying? Strip clubs, all types of different places in the past. And there are some sisters and some brothers who are quote unquote prominent in our movement right now, that if you talk to them long enough, they'll tell you where they came out of. And there's no shame to it. You know what I'm saying? Because of the fact that, like I said, people learn through inspiration, aspiration, or desperation. You know what I'm saying? But you have to be a moral rudder if you're looking to attract people and invite them to join what it is you have. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to go from, they don't want to go from the pot to the frying pan. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so you know, it's a task.
So Kalonji, there's another question that's directly aimed at you, but Jomo, feel free. Right. So the question is, it's from Sounds of Saying Elsewhere, a regular on Black Power Media. I know that you, Kalonji, have been involved in union organizing before. Can you speak on whether you consider workplace organizing to be part of a grassroots survival program?
I do, because of the fact that, you know, when you talk about and I'm glad you've been checking on it. Sound of St. Elsewhere. That was back in the 90s. Shout out to all the union organizers out there. But I would say, yes, I do consider it part of grassroots survival to an extent, because of the fact that there are people who are suffering on the workplace. You know what I'm saying? There's people who are wage slaves, and there are people who are, you know, working under certain conditions or whatever. So as Bunchy Carter from the Black Panther Party would say, he said, if you can't do nothing but spit, then motherfucker spit.
I'm trying to find it.
You know what I'm saying? We have to be able to on all levels. And I think that, you know, oftentimes we get the organizing police. They tell you what's movement, what's not movement, what's this, what's not that. Get in where you fit in. Get in where you fit in and put that work in. But I would lastly say too, man, because of the fact that oftentimes folks judge the revolution on the revolutionary. And what I mean is, just because a cat's a revolutionary don't make him a righteous man or woman. They might just be against the state. You know what I'm saying? So being a part of an organization puts the checks and balances in things so there can be some type of accountability. So to all of you, I suggest that you join some type of organization. It don't have to be mine, but get down with someone because of the fact that it's going down.
That's right. Jomo, I'm gonna pitch this one to you. It's from Coco, another regular to Black Power Media, and she says, "Can y'all talk on being led by principles and what that might look like to help work through conflict and contradictions?" So, and I think the focus is internal conflicts and contradictions.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Kalonji said it, you know, right. I think, you know, you do have to have principles that guide you in those particular conflicts. For us in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, a lot of that is grounded in our 6 principles of unity. Underneath that is our MXGM personality that I think helps guide us kind of what's the set of behaviors that we want to be engaging in particular political struggle. Also understanding the idea, what kind of struggle are you talking about, right? And so for us, like, if it's ideological struggle, then that shouldn't be an antagonistic struggle. It's a struggle to find the right ideas and the right program of action. And you use kind of what the organization's mission and what it says it's about to be that guide. I think again, I'm quoting a lot of Kwame Ture today. I think he has a story where he talks about, like, you know, he had moments where he didn't agree with the program of the organization, and he felt like it was his duty to do the best job at that program to prove that it does not work, right? And then to be able then to re-enter that conversation with integrity. So I think it's also important to understand kind of how your organization makes decisions, right? For us, we use some form of New African consensus with democratic centralism. So we open it up to debate, but once the decision is made, we're all in. And I think it's a process and a struggle, and you got to ultimately be committed to the organization and its principles. And oftentimes what we see is that, you know, people fall out of organization at the first disagreement that they have, and I think that's something we really got to look at and really figure out how we really be in struggle with one another to find these answers, because that it didn't stop. There was contradictions in the New African Independence movement. There's contradictions in the Black Panther movement, in all movements, and it is as Cabral talks about, like, the struggle for unity is necessary before we enter into struggle.
Okay, I got 2 questions, and we got 4 minutes.
All right.
So I'm gonna just throw them out there. One, asks, can a person engage in capitalism in order to fund the revolution, or does that make she a part of the petty? Well, obviously it makes you part of the petty bourgeoisie, and maybe even the capitalist class. So there's that question, and then the other question is, boy, it's a lot of questions about, can people practice capitalism and still be revolutionaries? So we're just gonna say no.
Right. No. All right.
No. Okay.
And
so,
you know, Sundiata, if you don't mind, I mean, pointing out the fact that Black folks in America, they are aspiring capitalists. They can't be capitalists because of the fact that you got to control the means and the wealth and the production.
Right.
So on and so forth.
So we the fucking capital, right? We're the primitive accumulation that was stolen.
Right. We the Bitcoin. Instead of Bitcoin, we the
let's
Bitcoin.
Put it this way.
Yeah.
You got to exploit.
Right.
If you're gonna be a capitalist, you got to exploit people. You got to suck their blood, as Malcolm said.
Right.
You got to be vampiric.
That's right.
All right. Last question.
But while you waiting for that question, I think that speaks to the level of political education that still needs to be done. That that's a real question that folks wrestle with.
Okay, good, Jomo, you hit it, and I think this question is from Big Till, and it is concerning the need for PE. So the question is essentially, how do you see the role of PE in an organization?
Mm-hmm. One, I think it's part of the means of transformation, but it's one part, right? And as Kalonji has been talking and beating into your head, if you didn't get anything, it's about observation and participation, right? And political, and for me, political education is, right, how do you take new political actions under the same conditions, right? That's how you know your stuff is transformed. I think Fanon has a quote too around kind of, it's about reminding the masses of our responsibility to lead and take struggle. And that is at the root of political education. But I think it's best lived through trying to make change in the world. And so it have to include all the kind of understanding our enemies. As we say in MXGM, part of the 7 components of education is 1, knowing who you should be loyal to, knowing who your enemies are, knowing what needs to be done. And I'll give you the rest when you join the Malcolm X grassroots movement. What you got, Kalonji?
Thesis 13 of Marx's thesis on fear about. The point is not to study the world, but to change it. Absolutely. Kalonji, you get to take us out.
Okay.
You got a minute.
PE, political education. A revolutionary without political education is confused. And they stand a chance of fighting on the side of the enemy because they'll be unclear as to what the fight is about, who the enemy is, and who they are in our people's liberation movement. So political education is like, without political education, it's like you saying, hey, I'm gonna give you a piece of this cake, but it don't have no sugar in it. It's not sweet. It's just bread. It's not cake. So
and you don't get a fork or a plate.
Yeah, what's that Sankara quote? Soldier without ideology is just a mercenary.
Period. It's an American.
Brothers, I truly want to thank you for a wonderful show. I've enjoyed it. I know that our audience and I myself have also learned quite a bit. So thank you so much. I'm going to take us home now. So let me remove you guys. Remove myself.